Hello everybody, welcome to Live on Mars. I'm Alex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and today's episode we'll be talking about the remote working solitude, but that's specialized on C-level executives and leadership positions and in more senior roles like the kind of freelancing that Xavier Noria, one of the Rails core members, Ruby hero, and he was one of the first guests on this podcast on the Spanish feed. And with the former CTO of Typeform, now it's official. Pau Minoves is no longer the CTO of Typeform. He's on a break. I don't know if that's long enough to become a sabbatical, but we're discussing about this because we have recorded a couple of episodes. You have seen them both in the English and the Spanish podcast feeds. But we didn't touch on the more managerial positions and leadership roles. And so there are a few nuances here and there that make it different from being just an employee in a company, right? So we discuss as how the directors of companies or how team leaders have to persistently and proactively reach out to people, to team members, how to spot somebody who's struggling not only in work but also in life, because one of the main differences in officeless companies like MarsBased is that we don't get to see people frowning or just wandering around the office, roaming and just being dispassionate about things. They're just kind of feeling empty, and you see them with very sad faces and empty communications. In a remote working environment, working asynchronously, this can be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to spot. So that's one of the topics that we discuss. We begin in the starting of their careers when they were developers. They were starting out and they began developing remotely or working remotely in 2006, 2008 respectively. So that was very early on. We didn't have as many tools as we have today. We didn't have those paradigms. We didn't have all these approaches and workflows and whatnot and platforms that we use nowadays, and how it has evolved over time and how these have matured into something more stable in higher ranks in the organizations and hierarchies of their companies. So without further ado, let's jump right into this episode. Welcome to Live on Mars. How are you doing, Xavi?
Good, thank you, man.
How are you doing, Pau? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both for actually standing up to the challenge of talking and opening up about the remote working solitude, which is a thing that we experience quite a lot. Most likely the remote working people between 12 and 18 months into working remotely. So I wanted to very quickly, first off, maybe Xavi, you want to start first. When did it hit you for the first time? And did you know that this was the thing? Or maybe because you started pretty early on doing remote work, that was not yet documented?
So I have been working remotely since 2006. So it's been 16 years.
Wow.
And yeah.
Not 16 months, 16 years. You said
16,
it right.
16 years. Yes.
Holy cow.
From 2006 to 2009 as a CTO of a company that was founded to be fully remote. And from 2009 on, as a remote consultant, as a remote freelancer. So I am very used to working remotely, and I would say I have never experienced personally solitude.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know how much of peer pressure plays into people actually feeling it, right? So I don't know if that's a thing. How about you, Pau? What was your experience with remote working solitude?
I think I have two periods. I started as when I was a developer, I think 2007, something like this. I'm trying by memory. I would have to check LinkedIn with some developer geeks that can I do this from home? Yes. And then I went home and never came back. And that was like 2 years, 2.5 years. I think I did there all the mistakes you can do working from home. It really turned out bad. I got out of shape. I lost commuting time, all the things. Overworked. It was terrible. Then I go back to the office. Had a period of managerial jobs when I was just a regular office until I joined a full remote company and a very big one, 2,000 developers, fully remote as a managerial position. And then when I was at Typeform, originally it was an office. For me, it was a back to the office moment. Was kind of weird. I was not used to it. And then confinement came, and we have to all go back to home. And as you know, 1 year later, we actually decided to stay full remote. So it's been waves of up and downs for me. I don't have that continuity Xavi has.
But you said that it didn't quite strike you. You committed a lot of mistakes, like what you mentioned right now, going out in shape, maybe overworking or whatnot. But didn't you feel alone in certain times? Because for what I grasped from both of your experiences, back then there was even less communication than now. Now we've got all the tools in the world for collaborative coding. There's the tools like Miro, I don't know how that's pronounced, Loom and Zoom and Slack and Teams and whatnot. I don't know. In 2006, man, there was only fucking Skype. So
exactly, man.
Yeah, I mean, and it was really bad. And I don't know, it didn't have video, obviously, right? So I don't know how you kind of like solved these communication issues, or maybe because nobody else was talking about it, you didn't identify it as such.
My experience was that you adapt to what you have, in a sense. So in that time, I don't think we used Skype, or we used perhaps it, I don't know, from time to time. But our main
WebEx.
Communication channels, no, it was text. It was IRC.
Wow.
So we had we have a channel, for the development team in IRC, which was a thing back then. IRC. And then email, and and some kind of, perhaps some software, like something like Basecamp, or that kind of thing, and that was about it, and also I came to this from a few years doing open source, and in open source everything is async, everything is textual. Well, everything, I guess it depends on the particular project, but in general, the culture is async, is text, So I was very used to this kind of channel of communication, and you didn't feel like you were lacking video. It didn't exist video. So you did your best with the tools that you had, and nowadays you use different tools that you did, 10 years ago.
How about you, Pau?
My first 3 years, I have to say, it was either solo work or literally working with my flatmate on some gigs. And that was the only way to work. You would just go alone and do your stuff, and then just reconnect with the corporate once it was done. It was like there was no possible collaboration in a company because nobody was ready. In my last year, actually, and that's very relevant to what Xavi is saying, my last year working remote as an individual contributor, let's say, I was actually a researcher at Typeform, at Ericsson. Sounds the same, but it's not the same. And what they asked me to do is, we have these 90 people development teams here, and this open source community are kicking our ass. Like, how can these, well-trained, paid people with managers be slower than open source communities? And actually, we researched what were they doing that was working better for them that Ericsson was not doing. And guess what come up? And this was 2009, more or less. Asynchronous communication, lack of clear hierarchies, all this flexibility that now people is going to in order to get best practices to learn to how to work remotely. And it's all trendy. It's actually open source has been doing for decades. Yes. Right?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how much that comes into play, because you both raised a really good point here, which is the role of open source, right? To say or to admit that I've been doing open source in the presence of Xavi here would be a super understatement, so I'm not even gonna say it. Just because I published some fucking plugins for Moodle back in the day in PHP. It's probably the first time I admit that publicly, but I'm not gonna say it. But obviously, you both raise a good point, like, because you didn't have a better world, a better setup, a better option, a better conditions. You didn't kind of miss it, like you just grew adapted to it. So in the sense that, asynchronous work, as you mentioned, I think, Xavi, in your episode we recorded 2 years ago, you're mentioning how Rails was built completely asynchronously. There's never been a meeting. everything is written down, no emails, no Zoom calls, no nothing. And so a lot of project managers were like, their brains were exploding probably listening to that podcast. Like, what do you mean no meetings? What do you mean no Google Calendar? So,
Yeah.
and so maybe because you had to endure some years of freelancing, which is something that, I've done quite a lot, not so much, or way more than fucking open source. But by enduring that and working alone, maybe we have leapfrogged that kind of initial stage. So do you think that's kind of like something that applies more to less experienced profiles, or people who have experienced an office setup first and then have gone to work remotely? What's your take on this?
So I believe this is very personal. I mean, people in open source, they feel at home working these ways. It's like doing things in a super efficient way,
Yeah.
We why don't we have video calls, for instance? Well, if we thought that a video call was an efficient way to solve some particular discussion or whatever, we would do it. It could be an initiative of ourselves, But the reality is that those initiatives do not come out. Why? Because when you have full freedom in at least in the profile of people doing this, when you have full freedom and you are the one choosing the tools and choosing how to work, the fact is that you do not choose this kind of tools. All right. And one of the things that influences the kind of communication channels that you need is the way that the company or the project or whatever operates. All right.
Yeah.
So, for instance, my freelancing is always programming in a wide sense of the word. Doing design of the software or whatever. In any case, fortunately, I do not use video conferences a lot even today. Why? Because my schedule is work. It's focus. I don't have.
But
meetings.
You're in the commanding side of the negotiation here. So you're like, you want to work with me? I can choose my clients. My rules are I don't do video meetings. Maybe, right?
In a sense, so it's not like I don't do video meetings, but it is true that I do not follow like standard company procedures if they have it in place, because I am external. Yep. So if they have a Scrum or they have regular meetings, one-to-ones, that kind of thing, it is true that I don't do anything of that, So that just because of that way of working eliminates a big amount of meetings, let's say. Correct. Dailies, weeklies, company status, that I don't do anything of that. I'm independent, external, and work my own way, so that eliminates a lot. So even today, even with client work, it is mostly async and text, right? So go ahead.
No, just what mine was a completely a related topic. So you might want to finish first. Sorry.
All right. So I was saying this depends on the profile and the way you work, because as you said before, a manager may have a different kind of needs. A manager may need to meet people, and do, I don't know, the agenda of a manager normally is covered with meetings, and that's totally different kind of profile and different kind of needs and different kind of channel communications that are needed to accomplish that kind of work, let's say. In open source, we normally don't have managers. When I think open source, I am thinking Rails, right? Yeah. If I don't know, if VS Code made by Microsoft is technically open source, probably they have their own, I don't know, but maybe that's not the type of open source project that I have in mind, all right? I have in mind the kind of projects like Rails, right? So like the traditional open source, let's say that way, So Alex, there you don't have, yes?
No, sorry. I was gonna say I want to add something before Alex goes along a different topic. Yep. So finish, Xavi.
Okay. So that's it. So since there are no managers, there's no meetings, there's no hierarchy, Yeah, the kind of tools that we use are text-based, and we do not miss, videos or whatever just because we choose not to use them.
Oh,
I think that adding to what Xavi is saying, which is absolutely true, there is also another factor going on. Open source has certain survivor bias. The people that goes to open source is because they like it, right? And
yeah.
that's been going on for decades, right? So if somebody doesn't like it and it's still a very good developer, but not that kind of developer, that probably is going to roam like meetups and Java user groups and stuff like this, where it's going to socialize and it's going
Yes.
to work in a very different way, right? It's going to be very comfortable in an office, developing with other people and using post-its all day, right? And that's different kind of person. What's different, even if open source, I do agree, it holds the key for a lot of very good solutions to the problem that people has now going remote. We can't forget that that's a selection of the people that likes really thrives working like that, while confinement and this new remote trend with like companies closing offices has thrown to that wall a lot of people that didn't choose that and didn't necessarily like it or are built for it. And I think in that thing, there's been a lot of suffering. There's a lot of people that have had a very hard time being forced to work like that when that's not what they want. And a lot of the great resignation actually comes from trends like this, that people will just switch companies because they don't like that anymore if a company has made that decision.
Yeah, it's not the company you sign up for. It's the same when a company sells to another company. It's like, well, I wanted to work for CodeGram, not for Factorial, right? And so they quit when the acquisition happens. Or the case of Typeform, they sign up because Typeform had the best motherfucking offices in Barcelona. But then all of a sudden you close the offices and they're just like, oh, now it's remote
It's a major
only.
change.
Yeah, and some people are like, I cannot work. Like a friend of mine who used to work at Typeform, and she's like, no, I need an office. Like, I need an office. Yep. I cannot work in a remote working environment, right? So I understand. There's a second thing that's been hovering over like all the things that you have been mentioning since the beginning of the conversation, which is personality types, right? Kind of like an underlying thing. I think that it really boils down to what kind of person you are. Most developers, I mean, obviously we don't represent the vast diversity of developers because we're essentially three white men speaking on a podcast. But if we take into account personality types, right? I think that for the most part, it wouldn't be an exaggeration if we said that developers tend to be more introverts, right? People that like spend a lot of time on the computer, like to talk over the internet, and don't enjoy that much the social part of, going out, selling, speaking in conferences and whatnot. And so maybe for them, it's good to work remotely, right? But as you mentioned, like there's also like company types, there's also like moments in time of your life. But I don't know how much does that play into like your experience of working remotely. Do you think that your type of personality has influenced your perception of remote work? Tell me, you might want to go first. Maybe say what kind of personality do you have?
So I am an introvert extrovert or something like that.
Okay.
It's a mix of things. Yes, but
ambivert, right? Ambivalent.
I guess. Yes.
Yeah.
So to describe it in simple terms, I am super. I have no problems being alone.
Yeah.
So I'm super happy being alone. I do not need to socialize all the time. But at the same time, if we go out with people, I have a good time also. So it's kind. So for instance, I know people that always always want to be surrounded by people.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
So those people, and I believe this is very important in this conversation, precisely because remote is not for everyone. Because there are people that have different preferences in this regard, right? So, in my particular case, I've been 16 years working at home. There are people that working at home do not feel good, so they may be fine working remotely, but they do not feel happy being at home in particular. So they go to the coffee shop, they go to a co-working space, or they look for places to be out of home, perhaps because they want to have a psychological separation between my home and my work. They want to have this kind of sharp distinction, between the two of them, maybe because they have kids and they have meetings and stuff, and they cannot, make both things work together. There's lots of situations. But yes, in my particular case, I just feel very, very, happy being alone. And also being alone allows you to focus, a lot, concentrate and do deep work, that kind of thing that, in other environments, well, you can do it as well, but as being alone in your home with silence, with your type of music, this is a perfect environment, at least for people like me.
Oh, you, Pau, because I'm pretty much like Xavi. I really enjoy being surrounded by people. Not when I started, when I was 15 or before I went on Erasmus, I was completely introvert. I wouldn't talk to people I didn't know. I could only maybe talk to my friends, Then I went on Erasmus, kind of like changed my mind because it's like,
what happened?
I mean, you cannot go like that around the world, right? It's like you either different types for different people, right? But for me, it was like, I don't want to play life in difficult mode, right? So maybe I do a lot of effort and change this, or I will suffer a lot in life. But I know not everybody can do that. But I really can spend 3 months without seeing anybody. I really shouldn't say that, but I admit that I enjoyed way more like the lockdown than I had suspected. Like 3 months without going out, it was like, wow, I had a
can we do another month of this, please?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
notwithstanding everything that was going on outside and all of that, but I think that I have to admit that I'm way more of a hermit than I thought I was. But anyways, how did it play in your case?
I think it's worth a better definition, or at least a definition on the table. I think a lot of people think introvert and extrovert means that if you are shy, you're an introvert. If you're not shy, you're an extrovert. And I don't think it's that simple. The best definition I heard, and I don't remember where, was that how you charge your batteries. It's what defines if you're an extrovert or introvert. Like if you have a bad day and you're tired and you need to charge your batteries, an introvert is going to go home. I'm gonna look that solo time, and an extrovert is gonna call its friends and it's gonna look for that socialization time, and that's how you charge your batteries. And I could really see this at play when we were forced to send everybody home, because some people would, the first 2 months everybody was okay-ish, obviously, when like with all the things that were going on there was a lot of fear, but you could see the strain 3 months in, 4 months in, 5 months in on the people that turned out to be maybe shy extroverts, right, but were really depleted in terms of energy because they couldn't socialize, and they actually needed to socialize for very sanitary reasons. And other people who was very comfy, and I count myself on this, working from home, and actually I don't need this part of this to end, right? That said, even if engineers have traditionally been very introverts, even in that regard, because how the profession start, I do think that's changing very, very sharply with new generations. And if you go there and hire 20 somethings, you are not going to get the share of introverts and extroverts you were getting before. This affects what they ask of the company, of course, because much more extroverts means that they want these socialization spaces, they want this connection. And if you send them home and expect them to work remotely for 6 months straight, one day they will resign because they cannot take it anymore. You know what I mean? And you have to adapt to both. So I don't think new generations, especially millennials, which is people born 84 and above, are so introverts as we were before.
Wow, that's an interesting topic, and that's a perfect segue into the next part of the conversation, which is something that it's been bugging me for quite some time, because one of the main struggles we have, MarsBased was born as a remote only company, and as a matter of fact, I remember the first day I met Xavi, and when we created the company, let me just share this real quickly. We created the company. We emailed everybody, literally everyone in the Ruby space, probably just Europe and America, right? For practical reasons. We sent emails to like 300 companies, and only 2 companies answered. One of them was Pro Ruby, so Xavi answered, and then was Thoughtbot. So basically, the people we admired, and Xavi came with his what is it? How you call that? Is the segue, right? The You still have the...
Oh, yes. No, I don't have it.
second.
I don't have it.
You don't have it
I
anymore.
enjoyed it for many years. Yes.
Many years. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we met you like two, three times. The three times you came with the Segway. And you had we had a very good conversation because we everybody back then when we were starting, potential clients were like, if you don't have an office, I cannot hire you because how do I know where your developers are? How do I know you're not a fake company? How do I know that you're not a group of freelancers? And you had a similar company, right? With probably was essentially more of a group of really, really professional freelancers, really top notch. And but one of the things I wanted to share here is my main struggle, probably one of the main struggles I have as CEO of this company, is the disconnect as a C level with the rest of the team that, you know, ebbs and flows. But the solitude is real when you're on the management side of the leadership team of the company, right? So have you experienced that this is more difficult in remote only environments?
Pau, this is for you.
But also for you, because you had been the CTO of a company, Xavi. So
yeah, I was, but you know, I describe it as like email and IRC, so you can imagine, you know.
Yeah, not really. Okay. Yeah.
I can give
also,
you.
You were on the same level. You didn't have like subordinates, right? So I don't know how big was the company, or was it?
No, it was a small team. Like I don't know, maybe at some time 20 people or something like that. I don't remember the numbers. But it was that kind of size, you know. So in that particular company, I was the technical director. I have been also technical director for some clients, you know, punctually. And my job was also remote, you know. But you said if the team is small, I believe you can manage, you know, you can set the culture, you can set the tone of the conversations on how do they deliver, you know. And if your way of doing things is textual and async and people are fine, you know, that flows with the team, it's perfect and it's very efficient, you know. That said, if there was people like Pau described it before, that would struggle working that way, well, as a CTO, I would just adjust, you know, to what makes people feel better. But in my case, you know, in the teams that I have been director of, doing async and that kind of thing worked very well. But Pau has more experience than me.
Yeah, I love you just share one thing because I mentioned that, you know, I have disconnect from being the CEO. Very rarely I get involved in the projects that I sell. So I don't have a lot of interaction with my team. And therefore, there's a bigger disconnect perhaps than CTOs in companies. But then again, CTOs of really big companies, like in this case, Typeform is not 10,000 people, but like it's big enough where you have like dozens of engineers. So definitely at a certain point, you are not one of them anymore, right? They don't consider you one of us. How did you survive this?
I think that moment is when you stop reading pull requests.
Oh,
yeah. They don't consider you one of them anymore the moment you stop reading pull requests. The moment you stop
fundraising, what is that?
Exactly. That's way early on. When you go full remote, I mean, management is a solitary profession. That if you've been a manager, you know, not only because you have very different contexts. You have information not everybody has, and in some cases you cannot share it, even if you wanted to. But also you have very singular responsibilities. So there is certain solitude in that, even in an office, right? That happens to everybody. I got my own office, and like meaning my own table on a separate room in one of my jobs, and I accepted the biggest mistake professionally that I've ever made, right? But it's very isolating, that's for sure. When you go remote, the truth is it just gets worse, and there's no easier way to say it. What I could observe in my experience is that hierarchy levels, even if you just have 3 layers to manage 150 people, the distance between these layers just grows a lot. The way these layers feel to people, it grows a lot, because even if you were the boss of somebody's boss, you would share a coffee machine. You would go to the same meeting. You would talk in the hallway before the meeting. Like you would humanize the other person. The moment you are so detracted from them and you're just not invited to the same Zoom meetings as that person, you're nowhere. You're very, very far, right? And if you are high up the hierarchy, then that's really, really far for you. And that was really a factor. It would be very hard for people. On the same time, you really realize that you have to over communicate. And I think that's the best
Yeah.
practice. It's known on remote working that you have to over communicate. But and you feel you are over communicating, and half of your meetings on your agenda are essentially to transmit information and send recordings and whatnot. Skip levels work very well for me. I have to say, like 1 month, every 2 weeks, or every one hour every month, or every 2 weeks with a team, just skipping all the levels, just go to the raw developers and saying this hour is for you. What do you want to talk about, right?
Nice.
That worked very, very well because it has this, you see in my face again, we're humanizing each other, right? But at the same time, I learn your pains, I learn a lot of things, I flatten the organization again, right? That's the only thing for me that worked a little bit. But you are always chasing miscommunication. That's true. And I think I've not known a company that's big enough that doesn't say that they have an internal communication problem. I think everybody agrees that the company, if it's big enough, has an internal communication problem. When you go remote, that just gets exacerbated, or your falls
Exactly.
there, it just gets worse, right? And if you are the manager leading that system, wow, you're going to spend a lot of time communicating. And even so, you will keep finding people who don't know that thing that you just set on an all hand, send a newsletter about, had every manager in the company say on their stand up, like, and you still find pockets of people who didn't hear it. And that's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, because there's a fine distinction between over communicating and creating too much noise, right? So
Yes.
the separating the chaff from the grain is really complicated. So you think, oh, over communication is good, but then again, you're also creating a lot of noise, and then maybe people are like, there are too many company emails, there are too many posts on Basecamp, so I will just read them once a month, and all of a sudden they miss on the important ones just because you sent too many, right? So there's got to be like kind of a policy. The other thing that I feel like, and my company is obviously not as big as Typeform, is more like on the same kind of level of size with the one Xavi had, is that I have to personally reach out to people to force that communication, right?
Yes.
Because two reasons. One of them is like, kind of like developers, they all want to talk to the CTO, but they don't want to talk to the CEO. I mean, not that they don't want to talk to me, obviously, but they're like, they share more things in common with the CTO, and probably they're like, oh, I've got this problem with our spec or something, and they know I might not be able to solve it, whereas my co-founder Xavi will. And the second is that the first generation, the first 10 hires, the first even 20 hires, maybe you are directly involved in hiring, right? But then after those, it's somebody else doing the hiring. And even if you get involved in the process, you're just one step of the process, right? So in our case, there's the HR, the HR interview first, the one with the CTO, and that's the thing. But on the onboarding day, they get to talk to me, and so in a sense, it's maybe like, oh, he's the CEO, right? Not that we want to create this, but maybe people haven't been recruited by the CEO and they think like, oh, he's too busy, I don't want to disturb him. On the contrary, just ping me any day, right? So do you feel like you've also had to spend a lot of effort in reaching out to people and forcing this communication because maybe you think that the developers are not the ones that want to break the ice and come to you because they think that they are not worthy of your time?
Absolutely. And I would say don't get out of the hiring process until you really can't hold it and you really
Yeah.
have to. Just try to be there as much. I've been the last interview on almost all positions until we were 80 or 70
Nice.
developers, something like this. And then for all what we call leads position, which is all the manager positions and senior developer and above, until we were 170. So you can, if you are the last one in the chain, you cannot do the first interview, you can do the last one, but you have
Yeah.
to be there, being on the onboarding process.
Yeah,
And this
absolutely.
skips levels help a lot. I think what helps the most is less formal pinpoints, like use every pinpoint you can to be
Yeah.
available, be everywhere that you can be. But the more formal part of a process, things work less than just a coffee talk. skip level. Like I'm gonna schedule 1 hour with this team, all of them in the same room. This hours is yours. What do you want to talk about? It can be what you did in the weekend. Don't care. Let's just have a coffee together once a month. And if you do that, you really create a culture, and people really feel much more compelled to share and ask, that if you are doing the onboarding, talk to them. They think they just need to check the box of the onboarding. Yeah, I talked to the CTO, right? But they cannot really ask questions. So that helps a lot. Like office hours, open hours, however you want to call it, hours they own, work much better.
Yeah,
but that's an unsolved problem. I want to be very clear. I don't think I've ever solved this problem. I don't think nobody has really cracked this.
Xavi.
Something that I have seen working very well is communication styles from the CEO. We are talking right now about the CEO, right? Because it doesn't have like direct communication like the CTO has normally, right? So I have seen CEOs excel at that due to their communication style and due to what by all accounts seems to be like a deliberate effort to appear as a reachable person, to be one of the team, and to not to not build walls, of C-level, of that kind of roles that people, if you don't say anything, they are going to assume, So a deliberate effort for being reachable, for being informal, and for being, one of the team, And another thing that I believe works remarkably well compared to the time frame that it demands is offsites.
Yes. So I was going to say yes.
It's amazing because you bring the company to an offsite, I don't know, a few days, in a, the kind of offsite that we know. And that totally, so just spending a few days in that context with everyone in an informal setting, that adds a lot of, it lowers the barriers for a lot of people, I believe, because you finally met that person, and you socialized with them. You had some drinks or you had some, group activities or whatever, and then when you go back home or you go back and in the assumption that the company is remote, right? Everything changes. I mean, when you open a Slack direct message with that person, everything changes because you can visualize the person. You have met each other, and in my experience, that improves a lot the things that you do not have to say. The implicitness, in the communication between the two of you.
We've seen it that's the main reason why we do an annual retreat, but we also do the Martian days every 3 months. We meet, we fly everybody on the team, and we spend a couple of days in Barcelona. It's because it's pretty fucking expensive, but it's probably the reason why we've only lost 2 developers in 6 years. So probably it's the reason that keeps the pack together, and we see an increase in chat, an increase in motivation, and increase in productivity, right? If we could measure, like, you can definitely sense it in the air. We haven't actually measured that because we don't want to measure. But you can sense it that right after the Martian Day and for like a period of like 3 weeks, people are happier and more chatty, and they are more eager to do other stuff that probably they're not supposed to do, right? And kind of like, oh, can you write this blog post? Yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll help this friend over here. So definitely 100% on that. Pau, maybe you wanted to add something on the topic of retreats.
100% on it. I think being 100% remote, as in we don't see each other face to face ever, it's way worse than 99% remote. And I've been there. When I said that, I've been on a week on a company 3 years where we're 100% remote. We're 100% remote. There was nothing organized by the company in that regard. I mean, you could, because there's free citizen
there was a budget for that.
There wasn't. And I had to say, some of us managers, we paid our own offsites out of the company culture because it was so acute, right? Wow. And then we did some kind of financial tricks to put it under the company. But that's the need is there. It's so human and so necessary that even in cultures that they don't think that's necessary, it still happens. People meet. In Typeform on the other side, we were very aggressive on doing offsite, and that was regimented, I have to say. At the beginning, we told people they could, and we recommended them to see each other at least every 3 months. But I have to say, it took a year to really get that machine started and show them that they could. People love them. The reverse of it is if you are a manager and you are, especially at the C level, you got to think developer work is very ready for seeing. We have pipelines and pull requests. We have all this substrate and culture about how to do certain things. Boards don't work like this. BPs of marketing don't work like this. And
yes.
if you are C level, half of your day is dealing with these other departments, right? You're mostly a translator between them and your tech wall, and they don't talk about Brighton culture and this kind of things. So I've ended up having like 3 or 4 offsites a quarter. And some of them in San Francisco, some of them in Europe, so a bunch of traveling. Because you have the C-level one, the extended leadership one, then you have your departmental one, then you have some teams down the line where you're gonna go just for a day to be able to see them, right, and be seen. So you end up doing a lot. So you end up. I don't think the way we do this right now is very ecological. I'd say there's a lot of flying. There's a lot of flying in this face-to-face culture. It's definitely worth it for the culture. There is no substitute.
Because I think that the company that's 100% remote and doesn't allocate some budget for teams to meet is being very cheap. Is very cheap, and they definitely they don't understand that there's a reason why even presential companies they do a lot of after work activities is because they want to have some people meet remotely or in a different behavior and ambience and all of that. So that's why remote companies, we should also have some time in person, right? Because otherwise I think it's detrimental to teams and whatnot. Of course, there'll be that person who never wants to meet anybody, but I don't think in the long term that's feasible. But I don't know. Like I think and also in person, it's easier to spot if somebody is not doing well, in the sense that one of the struggles of remote working companies or officeless companies like ours is that you don't really get to see if you work asynchronously only and you don't do video calls and all of that. It's very difficult to spot if somebody's struggling with life, not only with work, because with work you can see on GitHub, but with life you don't see them frowning all the time or being like this or like roaming around the office and feeling like shit.
It's true. In the past when I've had this. People who opt out of going to the face has always ended up leading up to a complex situation, right? Yes. Something was going on there. But I have to say, after COVID, there's something that has changed very significantly. Is that going to an offsite has become an opt-in risk that people just don't want to take. Right. Yes. And that's a personal choice that didn't exist before. Like it would be unthinkable pre-COVID that you would tell your boss, I don't want to go to the office. Right. Yeah. But post-COVID, that there are actually good reasons for that. I have an aunt, I have a grandma who's all like, I don't want to risk it. I have my wedding 2 weeks from now or Christmas. Yeah. I don't want to do an offsite 2 weeks before Christmas, just in case somebody, and we've had these situations. And that's also it's very complex how you navigate this new right of opting out of face-to-face activities. And at the same time, a lot is lost when there's some face-to-face time. A lot is lost. There's certain conversations that just can't happen online. Certain dynamics is just not created with Zoom meetings. So it's complex. I think a lot of people is still experimenting through this and see what works and what sticks. It's very complex.
I like to in the top. Oh, yes, Xavi, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add a remark in the context of offsites and the topic of our conversation, which is that I've seen like to make it simple, 2 ways to organize offsites. All right. To put it simple, one way is we are going to do work only in some place physically. Yeah. And the other way is the objective of the offsite is not to work that much. The objective of the offsite is to be together and have experiences together. So in that style of offsite, maybe you do some work or some meetings, or you maybe you leverage that you are together, but there's plenty of room to socialize, plenty of room to play, to have activities like, I don't know, sailing with a catamaran, whatever, that kind of thing, And in my personal opinion, in this context of remote companies that get together, to fill that gap, I very much prefer, and I believe it brings more value to the company, to have the second style of offsite, the second style where you are not so focused on working all day, as if it was a regular day work, but you leave space for people to meet.
Because I think that, there's a distinction here. And I think a lot of people got it wrong when we went into COVID and said like, oh, the whole world has gone remote. It's like, that's not remote. I mean, it is remote in a sense, but I think remote is when it's something you choose, it's remote. When you're forced to the remote, that's not remote. Like if I'm forced to go to a co-working space to work for my company because they don't want to have an office, that's not remote. That's being cheap, right? If I'm being forced to work from home, but I cannot just take some time off and I can work from my mother's house, or I want to go to the countryside and whatnot, or work, from a different location, that's not remote. And people were unprepared, untrained, unskilled, and unequipped, right? So I think that is not remote. And that's why I think the whole conception of the wall has gone remote, and now it's like, oh, it didn't go very well. It's like, it couldn't go very well. Your team was not trained. People didn't want to work remote. They were suffering at home. They didn't have a good connection. They didn't have an office setup. So and it happened overnight. So of course it couldn't go well, But anyways, just last question as a parting words, I wanted to ask, like, what have you done in the, like, circling back to the thing that I was mentioning, that it's very hard to spot if somebody is struggling in a remote or an officeless environment. What were your tools as managers, or like as a team members and colleagues, workmates, to help somebody to detect if somebody was struggling and to help them? Who wants to go first?
I can
go ahead, Pau.
I can start. I think when somebody is struggling, every situation is a different universe, right? I don't think there is a playbook. First is you gotta differentiate. Is that a risk appetite, opt in or opt out? And I think it's a company culture statement if you want to respect that, and some companies will not respect that, right? And some others will respect that. And the only thing you can do is to make sure that the people who join through Zoom and offsite, which also happens sometimes because 40 of them are in the US, right? And just couldn't fly over. I think it's totally underrated how important video conference equipment in hotel rooms is. We have picked hotels sometimes that were like very nice auditorium, very expensive, very nice city center, or crappy microphone. Just a crappy microphone leaves 40 people. They just lose it. They just miss that offsite, and that was a quarterly readiness, all the product roadmaps, presentation things, something important. So take care of those things because there's always going to be somebody who will be on Zoom, right? So do whatever you can to bridge that gap. If that's not a risk appetite opting, and that's somebody who's really having personal problems, then I don't think there's a playbook for that. You just need to get an interest, do what you can. And it's very tough because helping somebody who is not only remote to you, but in another country with the different reality that they can just, log off and go dark for 2 weeks. It's extremely difficult. It's very difficult.
Xavi, you had something.
Same answer than Pau. I don't believe there's a playbook. And the way I see it, how to say it, when I normally do not manage people. Normally I am a freelance. I am working for a client doing software development, but when I have had to be director or whatever, something that is very clear, I guess, when you work with me, is that for me, because that's the way I think, the person is more important than the work. So that's very clear in our interaction. I am. So it's almost like the work. Well, we have to do the work, but that's like kind of secondary, if you allow me to say it that way. First is the person. And that kind of closeness and that kind of transparency and that kind of relationship that you build with that attitude, let's say, or that way of working, to say it more, in simple terms, allows for, things that may not work as you would like, or that if you are struggling with something, you have personal issues that you want to bring to the conversation because they may affect work or something like that. You implicitly the barrier to talk about those things is very low, because you are first and foremost a person, and that's clear, so it belongs to the culture, in your interaction, but other than that, no playbook, like Paul said. Yes.
We're all
just to add to this.
Exactly,
just to add one thing to this,
Go ahead.
Management is an exercise of trust. At the end of the day, it's the creation and the management of trust. When you work remotely, that trust becomes very hardcore. You will not be able to work remote with somebody unless there is a basis of trust. And if there is a situation that doesn't allow for the trust, you have to either build that trust or end the relationship somehow. So at the end of the day, it's as Xavi said, it's human to human relationship. You have to put the person first.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all recipe to kind of like deal with all these sorts of problems people might have. We're all different. So that's a perfect way to stop this. 30 seconds each to say what's going on in your life. How can we help you? Xavi, you want to start? What are you working on and how can we help you?
In my life, all right. So I am doing some consultancy, interestingly in Python. So these days,
nice.
I'm not doing Ruby. Yes.
Okay, because we get a lot of Python requests lately. We have to speak.
Yeah, so I've been doing Ruby for a long time, but this particular project required Python. Okay, let's do Python, the project is
What's the name of the company?
The company is called Tinybird.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're a Tinybird now. Yeah, because I lost you at Stewart. So you're still
Tinybird now. Yeah, I'm consulting for Tinybird right now, yes.
Nice.
So yeah, and in open source, I'm working on a library called Zyberg.
Yep.
So I'm like full speed on that.
How can we help you? Our community.
Community.
Yeah. So how can our community of listeners help you?
I don't know. I don't have a particular answer for that. You
don't need beta testers. You don't need open source help.
No, not really, because
okay, you're well off.
That is because I scope my work to what I can couple with, So nice. Yeah, you solve the problem a priori, like putting the constraints in the right places.
Okay, how are you, Pau?
Okay.
Well, as you know, I'm no longer at Typeform. I ended up a couple of months ago. I'm in the middle of a break without a due date, which I'm enjoying very much. So the only thing I'm doing is on this front of my life. I'm doing a lot of things outside of work, but in work, I'm doing podcasts like this one and coffees with interesting people who's doing interesting things. So help I don't need. I'm enjoying my break very much. If somebody wants to talk to me, there is a Calendly link on my LinkedIn page. Just feel free to schedule something. I'm enjoying these coffee talks very, very much. So just chat or mentorship or advisory or just maybe collaborations in the future. Incoming is nice.
So you're saying that there's a CTO in the market?
No, because I'm in a break. Respect my break. There will be at some point, but not yet.
Because everybody's looking for a motherfucking CTO. Like I get that request like 10 times a week. In the startup grind events, everybody's like, can you help me get a CTO? Can you help me find a technical co-founder? Like, no, dude, like there's no hope for you. There's no hope for anybody.
I'll let you know when that changes.
Yeah. Let us know. Definitely. Let us know. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right. My pleasure.